Okay, thank you very much. Scott Talley here, the founder of Network in Action. I'm glad to see that here on this Thursday, everyone is not zoomed out. I don't know about you, but my inbox has changed so much. I get in the morning and there's 7 to 8, 10 webinars. Everybody wants to be a source of information. I guess that's a good thing, but we're grateful that you guys have joined us. We're enjoying doing these and feel like we have a great panel today, hopefully to help business owners with a variety of different topics. So we're going to start to just go in a random order, and we'll get everybody in here and ask a lot of questions. So I thought because some of our panel have some pressing time issues, if they need to get off, we can let them off. So we'll go ahead and start. So Scott, let me introduce Mr. Scott Bishop. Scott has been a buddy of mine. We actually met through Vistage, I believe,
correct,
20 plus years ago.
Bill,
and
supposed to be on.
Scott, I can't hear you.
Where'd Scott go? Let me unmute my man here.
can you
I
hear
don't know
me?
how that happened. All right, we can hear you now, Scotty.
Did you miss all of that or just?
I heard we met in Vistage. That was the last thing I heard.
Okay, sorry. So we met in Vistage, which is a peer evaluation group a number of years ago. We stayed great friends, and Scott is really at the top of his field with STA Wealth Management. So Scott, we've got a bunch of solo entrepreneurs, micro entrepreneurs, small business owners on here, medium-sized business owners, some Network in Action members. Everyone's welcome on this call. So talk to us about what's going on. What do you see the opportunities? Where do you see the potholes? What should people avoid? Thank you for being on with us today.
Absolutely. Well, we can go down a couple things. One is, everyone has been getting really nervous because of all the business interruptions we've seen. I've seen huge disruptions for some of my clients in the restaurant business, hotel business, even the apartment business with the government saying you could avoid paying rent for 2 months. There's a lot of things finding out. The stock markets also took hits, so a lot of people's 401ks are turning into 301ks, maybe not quite 201ks yet, and so they're getting a lot of nervous. And so we could talk about that. But one of the things that we could possibly talk about, I'm going to post something in the message center, is since many of my clients are small businesses, which isn't very typical for someone in financial planning, but my background is a CPA and a CFP and an MBA means that I usually am pretty good in working with business owners. That link that I just put up is I didn't have the time to put together a new part of my website, but I'm calling this the Coronavirus Resource Center, like a lot of people are. And as I find good sources, whether it be some things that I put together or put together with other attorney or CPA firms, or even stuff from the SBA, which I could share with you, I'll type my email in the box at the end and people can shoot me an email if they want to see some of the resources. I'll be happy to email them to anybody that wants. But one of the things that I have in this resource center is I talk about many of the things that have happened. But one of the biggest things that people are trying to figure out now are this loan relief and tax relief that's been happening. As business owners, some of the tax relief isn't that big a deal, but it may impact your parents. Things like people that have IRAs, once you're past age 70 and a half, you're required to take required minimum distributions that are based on the December 31st the year before. Because, of course, many of those IRAs are worth less now, the government has stepped in and said for the year 2020, you don't have to take those. So if you have family or friends that are above age 70 and a half, which is changing to age 72 because of another law, you could tell them they don't have to take the RMD. So seeing that some of the things I have in this resource center are links to some of these tax issues. Some of these things I've written myself. Some of these things I've met with law firms or CPA firms to put good resources out there, people that I think are kind of top of their field in these areas. But the one thing, I don't know if we want to talk about it generally, I wouldn't mind hearing before I go into it, Scott, is whether the people on the call today have already been going and starting to file for one of the series of SBA loans that are available, whether it be for the $10,000 emergency fund, whether it be the payroll protection loans that they're given. I'm starting to get some good feedback on that, but my belief is anybody that has a business, that has employees, should seriously start reviewing what they should do. There are a series of tax credits people can have, and there are different types of loans. One thing that I've been learning through all these webinars that I've either been participating or listening to is you need to know which is best for you, because you can't double dip by using all these resources. Like you can't take a tax credit and get a possibly forgivable loan. So depending on where you can get the best benefit, you need to read through these resources so that you can truly find what's best for you. And I've gotten stuff with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the NFIB, with Vistage, actually, Scott, they've had some good resources, and with some of my favorite tax resources. So maybe some people can talk about their experiences or talk about some questions that they have, and we can get right to the right to answering their questions, or we could talk about it generically. But on that link that I gave, there's a lot of stuff in there that you could find. If what you want to find isn't in there, you can email me, and I'll put my email in there in a bit, and I'll be happy to email whoever wants those resources they might want to see.
Perfect. So I'm going to invite Joanna to jump in here. Joanna is helps companies with SBA lending, and so you and Scott can both answer questions. But let's take some questions from anyone. And good morning, Joanne. How you doing?
Good morning.
So welcome.
Thank you.
And I'd like you and Scott to both jump in here about any questions that we might have, because I think it's important. It really is about the strategy Scott mentioned. And I'm hearing conflicting things. So I'll start with the first question. And Scott, it's directed at you as best you know. So I am told that you can't double dip, but I've recently heard that you actually can apply for the PPP and the disaster loan as long as the monies aren't used for the same prepayment. Do you have any information on that, Scott?
Well, make sure we're talking the same thing. Like as an example, for the $10,000 disaster grant that you can get, pretty much anybody can get. I may be using the wrong terms. I'll let the person that's more familiar with SBA use the terms in case I'm wrong. But you can't get that and the loan, because what will happen is they'll reduce the loan by $10,000. You aren't double dipping. If they are for different businesses or different uses, it may be able to be done. But every time when you apply, they're going to be asking for your business financial statements, your tax returns, your personal credit. So if they're for two separate businesses, you may be able to do it. As an example, they have a specific carve out for hotels that allow each hotel to stand on its own. So some of those things you may be hearing, Scott, may have to do with different specific businesses. But if it's for the same business, if you own a car wash, it's my understanding you can't get these different loans with these tax preferences or these forgiveness things for the same business venture. And with that, I defer to Joanne.
Yeah, right before you jump in, Joanne, I probably have been on the phone with over 30 people in the last 2 days, literally staying on the phone with them while they fill out the application. I think it's in excess of 30 people. So I want to make sure everyone on this phone call hears me what Scott just said. And it is referred to as a grant, but basically it is very, very simple. It takes less than 10 minutes if you have 5 pieces of information in front of you. If you go to sba.gov, there is a gold bar across the top of the website, and on the right it says click here. When you click there, it immediately takes you to what's called a grant application. You can receive up to $10,000 allegedly in the next couple of weeks. This money at some point is going to run out. So I want to say, if you don't think you need it today, recognize that you can't predict where we're going to be in 60, 90 days. It's 3.75% interest, and it's available to anyone. So if you did not have payroll last year, if you treated yourself, taking out withdrawals or member draws, and all of a sudden you don't have payroll, you should absolutely 100% apply for this. And the 5 pieces of information you need are very simple. The date you started your company, you need to know your revenue from end of 2019, your cost of sales, your account number, and your routing number. That's it. It's less than 10 minutes, and you can have some freedom and some peace of mind. And I'm sure Scott would tell you that at 3.75% interest, even if you pay it back in 5 or 6 or 8 months, you're better off getting that money than not. Would you?
And I believe it's deferred for a period of time too as well. So the interest doesn't start accruing on day one. So get it started as soon as you can. But it is important to know if you have employees and you have to furlough employees, and I'll defer to Joanne on that. You want to understand what it's going to be at least in the PPP loan, because the amount that's forgiven, part of it has to do with the ratio of the full-time equivalent employees you have at the beginning and the full-time equivalent employees you have at the end. Is that correct, Joanne?
I'm sorry, repeat that, Scott. I was reading something.
Okay, no, because sometimes the start of these things in terms of the forgiveness, one of the factors is how many full-time equivalent employees you have at the beginning and how many you have at the end. And
That is
you want to
correct.
make sure that if you've already furloughed a couple, I don't know exactly when that clock starts, but it's important to know those rules, because if you want 100% forgiveness of the level that can be forgiven, a big piece of that is a numerator and denominator of employees now versus employees then.
To qualify for the forgiveness under PPP loan, you have to use the funds, 75% of your funds in the first 8 weeks for payroll or payroll related cost. At the 4-month period, you will be able to go to your lender, your bank, whoever issued the loan, ask for forgiveness and provide proof of payroll distribution within the first 8 weeks from your loan. And with that, they will review and verify that you spent the money according to the government, and then they will forgive that portion of the loan. If you do not retain employees, you get the loan, and then you choose to go ahead and lay off an employee, that's okay, but that portion will not be forgiven, and that becomes part of your loan long term.
But still, the terms are good, the interest rate's good. So if it's a lifeline, don't not apply for it if you need to keep the doors open, because it's also a long-term amortization schedule. I think it's like a 15 or 30-year amortization.
It is what they're telling me on the PPP. Once they settle the dust, and your payments are going to be deferred for at least 6 months anyway. So you're not going to have any payments coming to you for that first 6 months. You submit your payroll records at month 4 to verify the first 8 weeks. You spent 75% of the funds towards payroll or payroll-related costs. And then they convert the remaining balance, if there is any, to a term loan. They are suggesting today that term loan will be 10-year amortization at 4%. So it's still cheap money.
Yeah.
So even if you get the money and for some reason you don't distribute it amongst your employees the way the government's asking you to, it doesn't mean they come back in and take the money away from you. They're simply going to put it out on a term for 10 years at 4%. You just won't be able to execute the forgiveness clause. So either way, it's a win-win.
Great stuff there. Let me answer a couple of questions. So number one, Ms. Armstrong says one of her clients believes taking a loan, the government will have an ownership stake in their business. Absolute rumor. Fake news.
Real quick, Scott, they're talking about with these really big companies possibly taking an equity stake versus having it just be a loan. And they have done that before. There is precedent of that during the financial crisis in 89.
That's
Okay,
right.
what they're doing, just so you'll know, the EDIL, the first loan, they will take soft assets. So they will do a UCC, most likely on all business assets, to collateralize the loan, and you will personally guarantee. Any business owner will personally guarantee it. On the PPP loan, they are waiving collateral, so they're not going to even do a business asset lien, and they're waiving personal guarantees. So it'll be a pure, no liability, unsecured loan to your business.
Is that, Joanne, even up to $200,000, or is it over 200 has to be collateralized? I've heard both on the EIDL.
All the information I receive on the okay, which program are you talking about? The EDIL?
The EIDL.
Yes. Economic disaster.
I don't have anything that says there is a dollar amount attached to the way they collateralize these.
Except the first 10,000 grant, because they asked none of those questions.
Correct. First $10,000 is a free grant to everybody, and it's 100% forgiven, regardless of whether you're approved for the EDIL loan.
I want you to listen to that. So I don't know if you're willing to post on the right side, but it might encourage others. I'm not Scott Bishop. I don't have his background, but I just cannot make an argument for anyone not applying for that grant. I just don't see why anyone.
Scott, I can't hear you.
That's Scott.
Well, one thing also about that $10,000 grant, what I've heard, I have not seen people get it yet, is that could actually be cash given to you in 3 days, which is very quick cash, where the other loans aren't going to be that quick.
One of my clients recently got an email, or got to talk to the representative, and they're citing 10 days now. So it's going to be more like a 10-day turnaround to get the monies, not 3-day, at least right now, because they're overwhelmed. But they have acknowledged the application that they have in the EDIL. She has a signed representative. She applied for the advance on Monday and was contacted yesterday to be advised it's in process and it should be 10 days from application date to get the money.
Someone just said 2 weeks. So 3 days is like when this is going to, the system's going to be overwhelmed at the beginning.
Right.
But John had asked, is it going to be forgiven? If you qualify and get it, it will be forgiven. That is a grant.
It's going to be forgiven regardless if you qualify.
Oh, that's right. It's given to you if you apply.
Just give it literally. So like Scott said, this is a no-brainer. You are given $10,000 to go to this process. You were given a minimum of $10,000, any business owner. And I keep seeing questions pop up about sole proprietors. Yes, sole proprietors and contractors are also eligible.
But you need an EIN, correct? You can't just use your social.
You need to have an EIN number.
So anybody that does Schedule C alone on your tax returns, which is fine, you still need to apply for an EIN, which you can get on the, it's an SS4 on the IRS webpage, correct?
I'm going to defer to my accountant here to
They would
talk.
have had to apply for it before the disaster hit. Remember, anything after that February date doesn't.
For the EIN?
Well, so the way that it's working is you had to be in business with the EIN before the disaster hit, which was February
15th.
15th.
So if you set up a new entity or anything new after February 15th, they're not going to acknowledge or provide you with these resources. They're only providing these resources to businesses that were already in business prior to February 15th.
So let me ask the question. This is just a general question because I don't know the answer. I heard on one webinar that you can apply for the EIN as long as the business was in process. Just because you didn't have any employees, you might not have had an EIN. But I don't know for a fact. It's always worth trying to apply. It's worth doing it. Get the EIN, apply for it, unless I'm wrong, and someone tell me if I'm wrong, because it is free money. You don't want to lie. You had to have had a business that's truly in place because you are certifying that everything you're giving is true. And you don't want to lie to the government. They're supposed to lie to us. We're not
Right.
supposed to.
There's certifications that you must sign, and if you sign them and you're not truthful, but this is a government entity. They can come back on you. They can slap tax liens on you. This is a government entity. So yeah, I suggest not lying to them on those disclosures. I have not been a part of any of the meetings talking specifically about EINs. My whole focus has been on the loan requirements and SBA requirements. So I can't speak to that.
So I want to get into that in 1 second. Ashley asked, is there an income limit? I have a client that's a real estate agent and thinks they don't qualify because their earnings were too high.
Payroll limits are $100,000 or less per individual employee. So if, say, the owner makes over $100,000 in income, they can only qualify up to $100,000 for this benefit.
That's for the PPP.
That's for both loans.
Both loans.
But it doesn't preclude them. If they make 200,000, it doesn't preclude them. They only take into consideration 100,000. I want to make sure there was clarity on that.
That is correct.
There's no phase out like certain tax deductions.
And on the grant application, thank you, Catherine. I was about to say this. On the grant application, it does allow you to use your Social Security number or EIN on the simple grant that we talked about. I remember.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So you can use your Social Security number on the 10,000?
Yes.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes. And I help people do that. So I have a professional corporation with an EIN, sole practitioner with no employees. Am I a small business who can apply or have to wait till 410?
If you're a PC, if you're a corporation, you can apply tomorrow. If you're a sole proprietor or just an individual doing business, you have to wait until the 10th.
And I was told for the PPP, even if you started in a time when you haven't been able to put your tax return together, you can have your financial statements to allow you to apply. So say you started in September of 2019 and have not filed tax returns, you could still apply for the loan because there's other pieces of data that of course you have to be truthful for that they can use. So if you've started recently, it doesn't preclude you from applying either.
Correct. As long as your business was in effect before February 15th, they're going to verify your payroll records separately by your payroll tax forms and stuff. So yes, that's a correct statement.
You'll add your W-3 and your 1096s together.
Did
Divide
you?
it by 12, multiply by 2.5.
Okay. Did y'all hear Lisa?
No, if you can repeat that, please.
All right, so they'll take your W-2 wages and your 1099 wages. They'll add them together, divide by 12, multiply by 2.5, and that's what you would be eligible up to.
Awesome.
So basically, it's your average monthly payroll, including your contractors, times 2.5.
And for people
Awesome.
who talked about the EIDL and the PPP, I don't really know this question. Is there a specific name if they want to go to the SBA website to find the 10,000? What's that called?
It actually, if you go to SBA.gov, it's a yellow gold bar right across the top. And as soon as you click there, it will take you right to the application immediately. It's front and center. You cannot miss it.
Yep, click here. I see it.
Yep. So for anyone that's willing, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I'd just like you to put over in the chat just to give confidence to the other people. If you've already applied for that $10,000 grant, feel free to post it. I just posted myself. I just want to see, I just want you to be aware that this is the reason the government did this is to put money back in the economy and help small businesses. You fit into that criteria. You can help the economy and you're a small business. So get what's yours. Okay, thank you all very, very much. Does anybody have any other questions of Scott and Joanna before we move? And you are welcome to stick around. Thank you all for replying here. Good stuff. Way to go. I'd like to see 100% of Network and Action members have the grant.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
The home and sole proprietorship application looks different. It's looks like the form is for disaster only. Or have you guys had anybody with a sole proprietorship apply for the grant?
Yes. It asks you in the second question on the grant application, I think, ask you, number one says, are you a business with less than 500 employees? And the second circle says, are you a sole proprietor? You would click one of those.
All right, got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Happy to help. Okay, let's move on. Thank you very, very much, Joanna. And I know that we make Joanna's information. Joanna, please put your email. Let me just say one second. There's also people who may decide to go for the bigger SB loan. Maybe you want to, get $250,000. Joanna's company will help you, assist you with that application, and she works very closely with these applications. And Joanna, take 1 minute and talk about the mistakes people make, like applying for too much, or how can they be kicked out and have to start over?
It's really about reviewing the information, the financial information you're providing the government. That is ultimately, when you're working with the SBA, they will kick you out. They're working in such volume. But historically, the SBA, if you don't dot I's and cross T's, you go to the bottom of the pile or you're in an auto decline situation. I think they're going to be a lot more generous than that with this application. But the biggest failure that can slow it down is not having good financial reporting, not having those payroll records, good numbers in place, and understanding that up front. They're not going to spend a lot of time on your application. If you have it right, going to go to the funding queue. If you don't, they're going to reject it and inform you, and then you go back in to the bottom of the stack. You pretty much, I have guidelines here. You can reapply after a certain amount of days. You can appeal the EDIL on the decision if they give you too little money, but it is a new application process. So just know that you kind of go back to the bottom of the pile.
And
How many hours do you think go into an application if you had to just guess?
Oh, it's been very fluid since the beginning, Scott, because first we were just working with the SBA website that crashes consistently. Then they changed it to uploading documents, and in 5 days, they changed the process 3 times. So it's a fluid condition on the EDIL because you have to work directly with the government website and the servers and their constant changes. So what's happening today may not be the case tomorrow. The PPP is going to go through banks.
Right.
Banks, quite frankly, have better websites and they're preparing for this. So I'm anticipating a lot quicker turnaround. There's a 3-week lag on decisions for the EDIL right now because they've been overwhelmed with applications. Banks are thinking they can turn around applications in 3 days. We'll see. If we spread it out enough amongst all banks, the banks that I'm using are specific SBA only lenders. So they're not going to be backed up with other types of loans and put your loan on, in a queue. They're only working this program 100% of the day.
If you are a Network in Action member and you don't have a relationship with a banker and you would like to use a Network in Action SBA approved banker, I'd like you to please reach out to your franchise owner or on the site. We can get you coordinated there. We have bankers we've talked to already in our groups. Okay, great stuff. Thank y'all very, very much. So if you will both put your email contact information in the chat there, because I know people want to get back with you. I'd like to introduce Trisha Barita, who's an attorney. Daniela, can you give Trisha the mic there? I wanted to have Trish talk to us a little bit about legal implications around employment and just everything during this time. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. Are you there still, Trisha?
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you for
Can you hear
joining
me
us.
okay? You guys can hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes,
you're
we
fine.
can.
Okay, thank you so much, Scott and Moose, for inviting me on here. So I know that this is a really stressful time for employers, my clients, and all employers out there trying to figure out not only what are you doing with the business, but how are you handling issues related to the employees. I know that I represent primarily the employers. I'm an attorney here, 15 years in Texas, in Houston, and I've been speaking. Friends with employment attorneys across the U.S. and Chicago, New York, Ohio, and California, and everyone is struggling out there employer-wise. I know you're looking at, hey, 2 months ago, you weren't even thinking of letting these people go because they're great employees. And now you're sitting here trying to figure out what to do. How can we get them unemployment? How can we figure out to save the business? So I think really like Scott, of course, yesterday, the Family First Corona Response Act came into play. So do you want me to talk a little bit about that?
Please.
Sure. So, and if you've been somehow missing all the laws that are coming through here, the big one yesterday that went into effect, that was passed on March 18th or signed into law by President Trump, was the Families First Corona Response Act. And that was prior to, of course, all these loans and other pieces of law that came through in the CARES Act. And so in the Families First Corona Response Act, there was set forth that if you're an employer, a nonprofit or for-profit employer with under 500 employees, that they wanted to, now there's a lot of different pieces to this act, but the two I'm talking about are the paid leave provisions really that, and then there, of course, if there's a CPA on here, they can talk a little bit more specifically about the tax credits in there. But if you have under 500 employees as a for-profit or nonprofit employer, that these provisions provide for you to give the employees some type of paid leave or emergency paid leave up to 80 hours for the first 2 weeks that they may need to be out for a reason related to COVID-19, and then also for the emergency FMLA. So this is there's a lot of information out there. I'll tell you this, it's been a little confusing as to what people are understanding about these provisions because there were several versions of the act before the March 18th final version. And then additionally, when the Department of Labor released their poster last week, they of course released one poster and then realized it had mistakes and then released another one. So the act went into effect yesterday. And just let me briefly say talk about the emergency FMLA piece, because that's really the long 12 weeks of potential paid leave that you might owe an employer if you're under this act. And that is, it's 12 weeks. Family and medical leave, if you normally have under 50 employees and you're not familiar with it, it's normally 12 weeks. And depending on what state you are, here in the state of Texas, it's unpaid because there's no additional state provisions that would require it to be paid. So it's usually 12 weeks unpaid law under the federal act. And then in this emergency FMLA, the last 10 weeks of that pay now are required to be paid if the employee is taking the leave for the reason to be unable to work due to a bona fide need for leave to care for a child whose school or child care provider is closed or unavailable for reasons related to COVID-19. So that's the only reason. So you have to be able to start documenting if these employees need to take this leave, and if the reason is related for childcare, then likely they may fall under this expanded emergency FMLA for the last 10 weeks. Now, those first 2 weeks where an employee may need to be out, they can also take those first 2 weeks, but that's under the Emergency Paid Leave Act, which depending on the type of leave, there's 6 reasons that the employee may get up to 80 hours, including part-time and full-time employees. And in that particular situation, if they take the reason for leave to be for care for a child, they can also get the first 2 weeks of the leave paid for. So in this particular provision, the 6 reasons, in case you haven't become familiar with them, the first one is employees subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order for COVID-19. Number 2, employees been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine for COVID-19. Number 3, the employee experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and is seeking a medical diagnosis. Number 3, if the employee is caring for an individual subject to quarantine or self-isolation. Number 5 is going to be is the same pretty much as the emergency FMLA, which is the caring for a son or daughter whose school or place of care is closed or child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 reasons. And number 6, the employee is experiencing substantially similar conditions as specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services in consultation with the Department of the Treasurer and Department of Labor. Just real quick, the reasons that they take this leave are important for employers to document, because how you pay them for those up to 80 hours, the reasons 1, 2, and 3 that I mentioned, you would be paying them at their regular rate of pay or the minimum wage, whichever is higher. And there's a cap up to $511 per day, $5,110 in the aggregate. If it's reasons 4 and 6 that I named, it's only 2/3 the regular rate, or the applicable minimum wage, whichever is higher, and they've capped that at $200 per day and $2,000. And if it's reason 5, then it would be also 2/3 the regular rate with $200 per day. And then in total, $12,000, including both types of leave. So I know that's kind of a mouthful. If you haven't been seeing all of that out there, I think that you should become aware of it. One of the big things, the questions that I'm getting, Scott, of course, is do I fall under any of the exemptions related to this? Because there's 2 parts of the act that allow for, in both of these, some type of relief for what type of employer you are. So do you want me to talk about those, Scott? I'll go. Okay, I'll just go ahead and say the first one would be
a second and go ahead and do that. Good, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. So the first one is the one that everyone's interested in is the small business, because when we got the first pieces of the act, it said if you have under 50 employees, there's going to be this sort of small business exemption. And then they really didn't give us a lot of information about it. All that was in the act that said was a small business is exempt from certain paid sick leave and expanded family and medical leave requirements if providing an employee such leave would jeopardize the viability of the business as a going concern. That's all we had until this past Saturday. And the Department of Labor gave us the clarification that many of us employment attorneys, and I'm sure many businesses across the US were waiting to hear, is that they answered this question about what additionally you would need in order to show this jeopardizing the viability. And with that, they said you need 3 things, okay? First, that you have to have less than 50 employees. Second, the leave is requested must be for the employee taking the leave because the child's school or place of care is closed or child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 related reasons. And 3, that the authorized officer of the business would be able to determine that one of these other 3 conditions exist. One being that the provision of paid sick leave or emergency FMLA would result in the small business's expenses and financial obligations exceeding available business revenues and cause the small business to cease operating at a minimal capacity. That's quite a high standard, and you would have to be able to document and prove that. Number two, the absence of the employee or the employees requesting the paid sick leave or emergency FMLA would entail a substantial risk to the financial health or operational capabilities of the small business because of the specialized skill, knowledge of the business, or responsibilities of the employee or employees. So imagine if you have a workforce and a part of those individuals, you absolutely need them in order for you to continue working. That may be where you qualify under that number two. And number three, there are not sufficient workers who are able, willing, and qualified who will be available at the time and place needed to perform the labor or services provided by the employees requesting the leave or expanded emergency FMLA leave. These labor and services are needed for the small business to operate at a minimal capacity. I just want to note there, in case you missed it when I was explaining all of that, this exemption we now are certainly confirmed now with the Department of Labor's new guidance that you will only be able to get the small business exemption for that reason of them taking it for childcare. So all these other reasons that I talked to you about where the individual was sick with COVID-19, seeking a diagnosis of COVID-19, had a quarantine because of COVID-19, or if the individual is taking care of someone else because of their quarantine for COVID-19, those reasons are not going to have an exemption for the small businesses.
Yeah.
The other one, yeah, there's just one other thing if you want me to add that's really important, I think, and I can post this somewhere if you want, but if you have not looked at the definition of healthcare provider, which is a full election of exemption from this act, it's quite broad. So even though you might not consider yourself a healthcare provider, and I don't have to read the whole thing here, but normally doctor's office, hospital, employees of that nature, if you contract with any individuals that are a healthcare provider, you may fall under this special exemption from these different paid leave laws. So, and that could be anyone from delivering, doing work and maintenance for these specific healthcare providers, or additional like distribution of medical products, creation of medical products, and that type of thing. So I would look into that.
Gottie's having technical issues today.
No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm
right.
bouncing back, but sorry, my internet is acting up here at the office. But thank you very, very much. Please, Trisha, put your email down at the bottom there if you're willing, so people can reach you for further questions. That was very valuable. Thank you. We got a few minutes left here, and I'd like to invite my friend and CPA, the lady that keeps me out of orange, into the conversation. Liana Gasparini's joined us. Liana is a graduate of Mount Carmel High School, my high school, as well as Rice University, which is a much higher institution of higher learning than my high school. But Liana, I want you to talk a little bit about, you know, delays in tax filings and all the things that are keeping you super busy right now. Thanks for taking some time to joining us.
Hi, Scott. Can you hear me? I'm on my mobile phone.
We can hear you. Thank you, Liana.
Okay. Okay, great. I apologize. I was in another meeting and I'm on my phone just dropping into this call. So, Scott, is there something in particular you want me to address?
Well, I think people would like to know about tax filings, what's been delayed, what can we expect, what's going to, you know, as best you can forecast, are we going to take a beating in 21 for all these loans and all this stuff? So any topic that would be related for small business around filing taxes, what they can delay, what they should expect.
Okay. The first thing is I have more questions than answers myself, and the IRS especially is trickling out this data very slowly, and we're just scrambling to, you know, to jump on any crumbs that they feed us at the moment. I think you're all pretty much familiar with the filing deadline being extended to July 15th. That has other advantages regarding retirement contributions and so forth. You know, keep that in mind when you're looking at your overall financial picture. the second part, of course, is I'm getting the majority of questions on the stimulus check itself, and people are asking, should I file? I filed in 18. What should I do? Basically, in that scenario, if you have filed a 2018 return and the IRS has your current address, they have, unless you've added a dependent, and you've provided your bank account information, then that's good enough for you to receive a stimulus check. If for some reason your financial situation has changed, or maybe, for example, you went from a higher adjusted gross income to a lower adjusted gross income, or you're getting a refund, you should still consider filing by April 15th for the stimulus check purposes, or just to receive your refund. Regarding businesses, there's still a lot of question marks. Just be careful for those of you who are applying for small business loans. There are also tax credits that are available, but if you accept SBA loans, they will disqualify you from certain tax credits. So basically no double dipping. Okay, so one of the things you might want to look at is, as information becomes available and you take a loan, you might look at what happens on the tax credit side. Scott, should I expand any detail? I guess there's unemployment as well. Let me just mention that the new bill also is expanding unemployment benefits to possibly include independent contractors, certain types of employees who may have not qualified in the past. So what I'm recommending to people is that they go to the Texas Workforce Commission website, and you can also subscribe to it, and they'll send you an email with updates. That they are updating their website as fast as they can to include any additional benefits relating to the stimulus bill. So check that out as well. So far, I don't see that there's anything showing up on the website regarding workers' compensation benefits because of Corona, but that could change. There's just not enough information out there at this point. And I think I'll just close by saying 3 great resources, if you haven't found them already, are the IRS.gov/coronavirus is a webpage where the IRS posts all the latest information, including news releases, and they have banners on, the stimulus bill and so forth. So that is definitely my go-to page that I check all the time. Number 2 is the Texas Workforce Commission website for unemployment compensation. And number 3 is the Department of Treasury's website, where there's a news section and there is data also included there. For example, there's a press release on that site that tells you that if you have, parents or elderly relatives that maybe just have Social Security income and don't really have any taxable income, then they will qualify for the stimulus check without having to file a tax return, just because the government has their records via the Social Security Administration.
Wow, that's great information. Liana, would you mind posting at the bottom your however you'd like to be contacted, your website or whatever information you'd like to share? I know you're super busy with your existing clients, but if you'd like people to contact you, feel free to do that. Daniela, you may have to help me with any post on the chat. Any questions that we have that I can't?
Okay. Well, let's see. Okay.
Thank you.
Great information. A lot of good feedback here. Scrolling. Okay. Scott Bishop, somebody requested your information. Okay. Let me see. Joanne, I know I filed on 11/26 of 2019. My CPA recently filed for my S Corp. My income in 2019 was W-2. Currently, I am curious if I would list my W-2 income.
That's for Joanna.
That's for, yeah, Joanne. And that's from Sue Kramer.
I had
Joanna, are you
a
still with-
conversation with Sue already.
Oh,
Okay, great. Okay, listen, I don't know about you guys, but I'm 62 years old and 5 years ago started this company, and I was hanging around a bunch of dummies when I was up till about 57, 58 years old. But I am just so grateful to have all of you smart people in my life. There's not anybody that if you need something, I don't have someone that I know that can help you. So I hope you reach out to me personally. But I want to thank Joanne and Scott Bishop and Trisha and Liana for your time and your expertise. And I want to thank all the rest of you who are equally as smart in your own field. And I like hanging around smart people. So I'm so glad y'all joined us today. We've got another Daily Dose tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And then I want you to put this on your calendar. Next Friday at 4 o'clock, we're going to have a happy hour that's going to go in the Guinness Book of World Records. 4 o'clock, Zoom with NIA. Go find the best short story to tell us or a joke. I need some laughter, and I know the rest of you probably will do that as well. So have a great day. Thank y'all for joining us, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Thank y'all very much.
Take care, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.